mic up. Hey, welcome to Mod City Live Spring Break Edition. Here we are. We are coming to you from Los Angeles, California. Um, and this is day two. Thank you guys for joining us. We're going to be talking about mutable plates today. Let us know if you have any new plugins, apps, software, hardware. What's getting you through the day? What kind of tools are you using to get yourself inspired, to keep yourself fresh? Um, do we need recommendations for that? I think we're going to maybe touch on a couple of things today. I think the most maybe relevant thing to mention to everyone out there who's maybe looking for something to do, looking for something that's not going to cost you any money, is go to vcvrack.com, download Vcv Rack, the latest version, and through the Vcv Rack website, you can add a set of plugins. There's going to be many, many plugins. These are basically additional modules for this virtual modular environment. And the relevant collection that you should download for today is called Audible Instruments. It's effectively the mutable instruments hardware line that is ported. All of the firmware of these modules are ported into VCV Rack and the different, a whole line of additional free virtual modules to the ones that come with VCV Rack. Sorry, I'm being distracted by the chat room. What's up, Wambra? Analog Assailant, Ed. Great to see you guys again. Thanks so much for coming in here. Mark, Grant, fantastic to see you all in here, and I really appreciate your coming in and sharing your day with us, or with me for the case may be today. But yeah, so if maybe just to get us all started, if you can share the show link with your friends, with your family. We're going to have a new one every day because we have to do a new link for a new show every day. I wish there was just kind of like a live streaming site or link that I could give you guys, but this is kind of how it is for now. Maybe I can embed it in my website. Maybe that would be a smart thing to do. So you could just go to the website and watch it there. Too many things to do in the day, I guess. But hey, Ed Sweeney, thanks for coming in here. And yeah, thanks so much, you guys, for joining us here. And this is going to be a fun one. I think, again, just to reiterate, if you want to do or see what we're doing in the software world, maybe maybe you aren't doing hardware modular yet. Totally cool, understandable. But you can get into modular through VCV Rack for free if you don't already have a VC, or rather a virtual modular tool of choice. And everything you do in VCV Rack, when you do start learning and using it, will be immediately and fully connectable to the hardware modular world with a audio interface, with a DC coupled audio interface. One module that will connect what you're doing in the software world to the hardware world. And there's a one-to-one connection in terms of how the functionality works. So all of these things connect. You can learn the techniques, the tricks, the tools, literally in VCV Rack, and then apply them to the real world hardware. Hey, Anthony, am I saying that right? What's going on here? We're doing a live stream about modular synths and music production and whatever might come up. If you have any suggestions, things you'd like us to talk about, let me know. I'm going to build it into the schedule. Today, specifically, we're getting into mutable plates, of which I have kind of an alt version right here called the Beehive. Now, this is effectively a one-to-one recreation of plates in the form that you'd find commercially through Mutable Instruments. I am a huge Mutable Instruments fan, and the only reason I have this miniature version of plates is because I'm using it in a portable case, and so keeping size was trimmed down was kind of an important factor here. Um, However, if you like, as I was just saying, just another reminder, if you don't have this tool, vcvrack.com, free virtual modular synth application that can run on Windows, Mac, and I believe Linux as well. And we'll have a one-to-one connection for this whole thing. Okay, commenting for timestamp. Numbers. I like how your name is just numbers. That's the next thing, I think. Okay, so let's switch over to the Beehive and let's take a look at what we're dealing with here. And let's also maybe just really quick, let me bring up the Mutable Instruments website. A wonderful website. They do a really good job of documenting all of their tools and of past and present, and they have great manuals for these things as well. Okay, so, oh shit. Okay, just closed the browser by accident. Fuck. I think we're still streaming. Hopefully this is still streaming to you guys. I just accidentally closed the page. Why do they make those X's so tiny for me to just click on? Okay, I think we're back up and running here. That's what I was trying to do. Okay, it looks like everyone's still there. God damn. Okay, well, this is what I was trying to show you. This is the PLAITS website. Okay, looks like it's still good. It's actually my social security number. That is not smart, if so. I'm not here to condone your behavior, though. Okay, so here's the PLAITS website. This is what PLAITS looks like in its official form, right? And we have some controls at the top, some attenuators in the middle, some ports, some inputs, all these lighter colored inputs or ports are inputs, and then these are outputs. Okay, and just a shout out to first shout out to DivKid. He's got his video on here. Shout out to Mutable Instruments for their great manuals as well. Their manual. This is just kind of the basic details, and if you click into their manuals, they go into quite a bit of detail about how the module works, what each control is for. So, maybe a requirement if you're getting into modular synthesis or music production in hardware or software form is going to be reading the manual. There are a lot of classic sayings in the tech support world, right? Maybe the most repeated one is read the fucking manual. If you want to really know something, well, if you want to be in the 95th to higher percentile of users of that thing, read the manual. So, just wanted to share that that site real quick. And okay, thank you guys also for giving me the feedback there on the site still running. Okay, here we go. Let's switch over to PLAITS, the Beehive. And just repositioning the microphone. Okay, so let's talk about what the F this is to begin with, right? What is PLAITS? PLAITS, as it says here, is, or Beehive, as you can see, my version is called, is a macro oscillator. In fact, if you're looking at this in Vcv Rack, this is called Macro Oscillator 2 in the mutable, or sorry, the audible instruments collection. And what does that mean? What is a macro oscillator? And yes, shout out to printing the manual. So, what is a macro oscillator? This is basically a multifunction tone generator. Okay, we have plenty of more basic vanilla oscillators uh, in the form of one output per waveform, right? That's one of the things we often see in our really basic modular oscillator. Sine wave, sawtooth wave, triangle wave, square wave. Um, Maybe an example of this, and not no beef to Tip Top at all, because I love this oscillator. This is my first oscillator, the Z3000. Has independent outputs for the four basic wave shapes. Now, does that mean four basic wave shapes are the only things you can produce from this device? No, absolutely not. This particular oscillator has FM synthesis. It has a built-in wave shaper for the sine wave and the triangle wave, um, pulse width modulation, hard sync. So there's, even on a basic oscillator where we have our four basic wave shapes, uh, we can usually perform quite a bit of wave manipulation. Uh, uh, there are ways to make more complicated tones come out of that oscillator. Well, the macro oscillator does this from a digital standpoint and gives us some selected controls per digital oscillating mode, and there are 16 of them built into PLAITS, or yes, this is a knockoff bootleg PLAITS. They still sell plates even. The one they don't sell is braids, which is up here. Just to give myself a little bit of mutable cred, I do have a number of mutable modules, and I love them. And frankly, there are times when I regret getting a module this tiny because it's kind of hard to play. But if you need to fit stuff into a small case, then we deal with the limitations that we deal with. And frankly, I have plans to buy a full size plates, because one thing about Mutable is these interfaces on their legit modules are really playable. You can grab them. You have space to move. It's not like you're just making some tiny minuscule change. Even the wider diameter of the knobs makes it feel like you have more real estate to work with in terms of the setting of the control. So this is not a thing to underestimate, I have to say. But I'm dealing with what I got here, right? And you might be dealing with um, the software version of it. Same deal. Again, if you shout out to vcvrack.com. If you don't have a modular system, that virtual module is going to look a lot closer to the original mutable interface, a little bit bigger knobs, a little bit more spread out. But the real estate, the place where these things are laid out on the panel, are for the most part the exact same, and the kind of lines connect up and down here. With the exception of maybe the control buttons, which are in the middle here. Another kind of limitation of the interface being crunched down. We talked about this yesterday, or maybe was it Saturday, where if we're trying to fit, I guess it was Saturday when we were talking about the nifty case and how deep it is, right? If you want to save space in terms of HP, we end up making accommodations like squeezing the interface into this tinier space, and that makes it a little harder to, especially with bigger fingers, to get in there. So, okay. So, thanks to Curtains in Motion for coming in here. Devlin, Anthony, I think I shouted you out, but thanks again. Lars, what up, you guys? Thank you again for coming in and joining us. So we're really just getting into plates now, and let's talk about what we see here on the panel. We see the things that we would sometimes expect to see in an oscillator, right? Maybe the first and most obvious thing that we want to see is a frequency knob, something to control the pitch, which is right here. Right? Now, what we don't see, if we turn up the signal, let me know how this comes in. Okay, looks like we're getting some signal in there. So I'm going to keep it kind of low, and hopefully it's going to be sidechaining to my voice. But what we don't see is a fine-tune control. And this is going to go, I'm not going to take it all the way up into the high frequencies, but this is something that we expect to see. We want to be able to really fine-tune it with our other oscillators. So as long as there's nothing patched to the FM input or the trigger input, we can use, I have cat hair on my fingers, we can use the FM input attenuator to fine tune. Yeah, doing this in Vcv Rack might feel a little bit different, right? The execution, the control might feel slightly different than actually having your hands on the device, but that's no different, I think, than any synthesizer, right? It's kind of like trying to use a mouse and a keyboard to make something smoothly, alter and change over time is kind of hard to do, at least in a smooth musical way. It sometimes feels that way anyway. Maybe with the right kind of mouse device, a trackball or something like that might be easier to achieve that. But when you map that control to, let's say, a MIDI controller, again, there's even differences between, a MIDI control, MIDI CC control knob, and controlling something inside of a actual hardware synthesizer. There are differences there, of course, too, but it's this being able to actually touch something and make things happen is, there's something a little bit different about that than doing it in the software. But so we're starting to see here that in the development of this module, even with relation to basic tuning methods, there's a little bit of a quirkiness, right? We have our main transpose or frequency knob, and we have fine tune in the form of this FM Now, that might lead us to wonder what's going to happen when we start modulating through the FM through the FM input, and we're going to have to try that out and find out in a little bit. But here we have two of the main things that we're expecting to see, right? What we don't have on this device is dedicated outputs for our basic wave shapes, because the macro oscillator is going to use digital means to generate different wave algorithms for its 16 different modes, right? There are 16 different varying types of tone generating algorithms built into plates, and those algorithms are going to give us distinctly different results musically, tonally, in terms of the shape of those things. Now, there are a number of functions that we're going to see when we get into the algorithms, but the main controls across all of those algorithms are going to be these three knobs: the Harmonics Control, the Tambour Control, and the Morph Control. And these will take on different meanings for the different modes. Though there's some sensibility to how these things are named, right? Harmonics is going to control the harmonic shape and potential, maybe the tuning, the perceived tuning anyway, of whatever algorithm we're using. Timbre will control the type of things that we might assign, we might in our minds assume would be filter based or additional distortion based controls. This is going to change the tonal character of the sound that we're generating, right? Timbre is analogous to tone, right? They're kind of the same thing, and also we could consider that the wave shape, right? The shape of the wave, the tone, or timbre of that shape are, these things are all kind of connected in a sense. So timbre is going to control things like that. Morph, this maybe is the less easy to assume what this knob is going to do, but at least from the name. But this is going to usually alter the tonal character or the relationship of the sound and tuning and tone and all of these things to some other degree. And we'll talk about what that's going to do as we go through the different modes. So these three controls will take on different functions depending on what algorithm we're using. And we can see over here as we alter them that the shape will change. So right now, this is dialed into kind of a triangle wave. You can see harmonics is controlling the frequency of this triangle. Now, that's because the particular mode that we're in currently is actually a dual oscillator generator. It's generating two waveforms. The one of them currently that we're hearing is a triangle wave. If we turn the morph knob, it's going to alter the shape of this triangle wave to something like a ramp wave. Let me know if this is loud enough. And it's going to keep going. And you can see now when it gets to around 12 o'clock, it starts turning into some oddly square-like. Let's see if we can. And then kind of does this pulse width. Turns into a square wave in a sense. It's kind of a square saw. This is similar to the braids seesaw, the kind of first wave shape on, or wave table, I suppose, on braids, the previous macro oscillator. Okay. Now, if we turn up the timbre knob, this brings in the second waveform, which comes in as a kind of, it's basically a square wave with pulse width. Now we're hearing two waves, right? We're hearing a triangle wave and a sawtooth, or sorry, a square wave overlaid onto each other. After we get to about 1 o'clock on the timbre knob here, and if we dial that morph knob all the way up with this wave present, we start to get that. Just the square wave. Right, so timbre all the way to the left, morph gives us that seesaw to saw to triangle shape, up to a really tightly pinned pulse width. And then as soon as we turn up that timbre wave, see, it kind of morphs from one pulse width to the other. And then we get some pulse width control of that square wave. And now the harmonics aren't really doing anything, at least for the moment. If we turn this further to the right, start getting a hard sync effect. So harmonics is really controlling the frequency of the triangle saw. Otherwise, not really doing much to the square wave when we're just using the square wave. So, what are we talking about here? This is a single mode. We haven't really had to change anything. This is just kind of the built-in starting point algorithm, which sweeps between pulse width square wave, hard synced square wave as we go further to the right of the Tambour Knob. We have the Morph Control in this particular case on this. Notice in this strip of LEDs in the middle, that top light is lit and it's lit green. Okay, that means that the set of insignias on the left side is the one that's currently enabled, and that is the pair of classic waveforms mode, which is kind of analogous to that seesaw mode on braids, with a little bit more definition in the triangle and saw and square wave portions of that. It was really more of that kind of funky, that type of a square saw type of thing. Right. So, cool. That's one mode. And we're getting some basic wave shapes out of that thing. Now, another thing that we should consider while we're on this mode is that there's an additional output at the very bottom of the module. Okay, we see there's an output down here. Sorry, down here. And then there's an aux output down here. That's going to output another set of waveforms. And maybe we'll do a special show just on hard sync. That would probably be a useful episode. Sync is kind of a weird thing. We're effectively forcing the waveform to restart and in tune with another waveform. Okay, so we've patched now into the aux output. And now we get two hard synced waves. You have to dial in the tuning of hard synced waves, but the idea is that we should be able to get a more complicated wave shape that restarts in tune with our other wave shape. So output gives us one set of musical tones. The aux output gives us another set of musical tones for each different mode. And that means that while we have 30 or 16 different modes, now each mode has potentially two, maybe very different tone generating algorithms in them. And we can access these simultaneously, or we can switch between them. A lot of things that we can do playing with that, but important to note that we actually have a whole other kind of side to each of these different modes. Okay, let's move on down to the next mode. Now, on this device, there are two buttons here and here. On the main plates, these two buttons are at the very top of the device. The left-hand button switches us between the green channel modes. The right-hand button will switch to the red side of those modes. Now, this is simply switching to let's say the 10th algorithm. There are 8 on the green side, 8 on the red side, and if we hit the green side again, it'll take us back to the green. And whichever one of these we're on, we just hit that same one to toggle through the algorithms on that side. Okay, so here's the second green mode. This is a wave shaping oscillator. This is taking a triangle wave, okay, might be a weird triangle wave, and processing it using a wave shaper and a wave folder. This is kind of going into like some classic distortion synthesis techniques. And let's just take everything down to kind of a simple place here. Okay, so harmonics at that's good enough. Harmonics is at 12 o'clock. If we turn it either direction, you're altering this sine wave shape. This might really be kind of the direction of the shape that we're going for here. If we turn our morph knob, we should get some more shaping. Oh, look at that. Sine wave to almost sawtooth. Okay, so one control, the Harmonics Control, gives us Wave Shaper, which starts to increase the gain of our wave shape. It hits a threshold and starts to bend in onto itself. This should probably, at this point, sound kind of like an octave and a perfect fifth higher than this, because you can see after we push it in all the way, we end up with 3 times those waves, 3 times that sine wave. Tambour controls wave folding. We can combine them together. I'll admit, I'm partial to bass. That's kind of what I was using this thing for the most when I've been using it live. I use this for all of my basses when I played at the SoCal Synth show at NAMM. I was trying to do kind of a bass house, improvised bass house modular set, and so I was using this for my bass, which I think you can see why. Now, if you're familiar with Serum, it is very wavetable-like. This is kind of getting into very close now to sort of a bend mode, an asymmetric mode, really, which is very similar to our bend modes and massive. But we have both of those options in something like Serum, or we can take a wave, squeeze it, okay, sick. Okay, now also we have an aux output on this. There's our sine wave. We'll see if that harmonics does anything once we get things going here. Ah, yeah, there we go. We have to start the wave folding. Apparently this one uses a wave folder built into warps. Warps is another yeah, that one's just got a nice big fat clean sine wave. Yeah, it's pretty righteous bass, I have to say. I mean, this is still on only the second mode, and as we get on to the third, it gets even better. Okay. I'm going to take a drink of coffee. Now, when we get to mode 3, things start getting a little bit more complicated. You keep talking, Ed. You're talking to me, if anyone. I'm listening. Okay, so we are getting on to mode 3 here. Mode 3 is a 2-operator FM algorithm. What does that mean? We have 2 sine wave oscillators. One of those we hear. The other is modulating the frequency of the one that we hear. Okay, maybe doing an episode on FM synthesis would be good too, especially once we start hearing what this can do, because this is where things start getting really interesting. This is where we might want to start employing envelopes, because FM synthesis really doesn't sound all of that thrilling. I mean, the same, I suppose, might go for that last example or any of these examples. These are, none of these techniques are particularly exciting to listen to if we're just listening to them blasting through the speakers, right? It's one thing if we're modulating by hand. It's one thing if we're, actually modulating using CV. But if we just set it and leave it, it's probably going to sound abrasive, annoying, and we're probably, our fight or flight mechanism might kick in and going, what is wrong? Or maybe our loved ones' fight or flight mechanisms will kick in going, why is that sound continuously going? This is not very natural. So there's certain things we'll tolerate, like our refrigerator, but these type of tones maybe not so much. So we need some modulation built into this thing. And with FM synthesis especially, that's where things become just super important to have some modulation in here. So let's listen to it first, and then we'll start talking about how we can start modulating things. Okay. This is a great time to dig into the internal modulation that can happen inside of this module. And so let's get into this. Let's listen to what we get with all of these things. Okay, so there's a nice big sine wave for us. Let's bring it up a little bit. Okay, pretty clean sine wave. Very cool. And as we increase the timbre, so one oscillator is modulating the other. The tuning of the oscillator that we hear, the tuning of all of our oscillators is essentially controlled by the frequency knob. The tuning of the, let's call it the modulating oscillator, is controlled by the harmonization knob. This controls frequency ratio. So in standard FM synthesis, the tuning of our operators is not done via semitone or frequency, I suppose. It really is frequency because it's frequency ratio. We're talking about the tuning of our main oscillator, or the note we play on a keyboard if we're using a fully composed synthesizer, FM synthesizer. And then the ratio of the modulating oscillators is the tuning relationship to the frequency that the main oscillator is going to play. A 1-to-1 ratio would give us the exact same tuning from the oscillator we hear, the carrier, and the oscillator that we're modulating with. This is effectively kind of like we were talking about, was it yesterday? Yeah, with vibrato. This is vibrato on steroids, right? Vibrato is slow, subtle modulation of the pitch using usually a sine wave or a triangle wave, right? FM speeds up the rate of the modulation, so we're not modulating the pitch by 5 to 8 cycles per second anymore. We take it up now. We're cycling at audio rates, the same rate, same frequency that our main oscillator is playing, and then we increase the intensity a bit. So instead of just less than a semitone in pitch modulation, now we're increasing our modulation to as we increase the timbre, we're increasing the intensity of that modulation to a point of what's the word I'm looking for? Of maybe up to a major third, probably, and then at 12 o'clock, we start to really aggressively modulate. Let's listen to this. So there's our sine wave. And I think now the modulator is tuned an octave lower. Doesn't look all of that different from what we were seeing with the wave shaper and the wave folder. But once we get to noon, these things really have to be in tune. We get this violent, aggressive beating like that. Morph on this mode, you want to have at 12 o'clock. As we turn it left, we get some phase modulation. We turn it to the right, we get feedback from one operator to another. I'm going to try to avoid getting too deep into a FM definition right now. Do a whole other show on FM. Okay, so that's cool. Let's talk about modulating this though, because things start getting more interesting when we modulate. Now, built into PLAITS are is a built-in envelope and a built-in low-pass gate. So there's a VCA and an envelope that we can control, and this is a very simple envelope. It's just an attack. Or not even an attack envelope. The attack is instantaneous, and we can control the decay time on that envelope. So I'm going to patch a clock source over here. And I'm going to patch into the trigger input. Okay. And let's turn the frequency up a little bit. Okay, so we're doing a re-triggering of this oscillator. Okay, so you might be able to hear some change right now. If we hold the left-hand button, we can turn the timbre and morph knobs. And if I turn the morph knob on the far left, we get, what was I saying? What am I talking about? We hold the left-hand button. Turning the morph knob gives us a control of the decay time. Now, you might hear right now, especially if we turn this up. There's a dullness, right? There's this is effectively in a Vca mode, what we might call a VCFA, a voltage controlled filter amp, or a low pass gate. And we can control whether this has the quality, the character of a low pass gate by holding that same left hand button and turning the timbre knob. On the left hand side, we're going to get a VCFA, a low-pass gate. A low-pass gate is a low-pass filter with no resonance. And we can use that as a volume control, just in the same way as we would a VCA, right? This is going to add the character of a filter, though, of a low-pass filter, in a sense, that it will roll off the high frequencies as the volume decreases. So we get a little bit of a dullness as the volume reduces, right? So if we don't want that, we can put this into VCA mode, where we hold that same button and we turn the timbre knob to the right. And you can see there's a little meter appearing here. The one on the bottom with the bottom 4 LEDs down there is for envelope length. And now we're at VCA mode. We've turned the timbre knob all the way up. And you hear it stays bright now. There's no change in the brightness compared to. Exactly. Digital Vactrol simulation, in that once we get that morph control, the morph is effectively trying to sound like or feel like a digital Vactrol. It's trying to just give us some control over the Vactrol or the low-pass gate decay, which in a Vactrol-based CV might be based on the characteristics of the LED and the photoresistor that are built into that Vactrol. Do these controls apply to all 16 modes? They do, with the exception of the the last 5 of the red or the right hand modes, which have built-in envelope controls already kind of applied to those algorithms internally. So we'll get to those in a minute. Those are things like a physical modeling algorithm, there's 2 physical modeling algorithms, actually, a string, kind of like a tube, right? And there are 3 drum modes: kick drum, snare drum, and hi-hat. And so those have built-in envelopes that we don't necessarily need to do all this, kind of shift knob turning to get to. But, once we have that trigger going in here, we now have a built-in volume envelope, right? If we unplug this trigger input, it's going to go right back to full volume. And so maybe I'll talk while I do this, and then... Nice. Right. Now, alternatively, we could send some sort of CV signal into this level control, like an envelope, right? And then the envelope will be able to shape independently to control the volume of this particular module, right? This is now controlling the volume internally with that built-in envelope that we just changed by holding that A side, or that green side button, and maybe we'll go to the VCA side right now. Oops, now I switched to the next mode. Okay. Let's go back to the FM mode for a second. Okay, perfect. Now, here's where this gets even better, because this envelope that we've just dialed in, and we can continue to tweak around if we like, is also applied to the FM. So that means we could dial this thing down to a nice low pitch sine wave. And we can use this built-in envelope and the FM control to dial in a pitch envelope. Let's elongate the internal envelope a little bit. Might be a good time to also try the VCFA mode. Okay, now there are some inherent issues here. Um, it's generally going to be advisable in synthesizers, whether it's plug-in or hardware, to dedicate an envelope for volume shaping, right? If we start using our volume shaping envelope for something else, then you know, we might get confused and start changing the envelope shape, uh, thinking, oh, I want the filter to sound different, and then we're also now controlling and changing the volume characteristics of our sound, and that is could be inherently problematic. We might want a dedicated envelope just for volume control, so that we can dial in our pitch envelope with a separate envelope, completely, you know, maybe we want that pitch envelope to happen faster or slower than the volume envelope, right? Maybe we don't want to hear all of that pitch envelope control. We just want to hear a little bit of it, and the volume envelope is short, or the other way around. So this doesn't really necessarily completely replace having a good source of additional envelopes. It does, though, give us some quick ability to dial in kick drums. Whoops. Also, probably just not advisable to operate plates with a coffee cup in your hand like I am right now. Grant, we can definitely do a show focused on envelopes. We will absolutely do one of those. Okay, so pitch envelope, really useful. Guess what else? Now, these three knobs at the bottom, these are attenuverters. Okay? These are generally meant to control incoming signal through the related inputs, the timbre input, the morph input, and the FM input. Okay, Wambro, you wait till the end and tell me. Remind me. Grant, you remind me as well, because I'm going to write these down, but my hands are a little full right now with coffee cups and plates. So these controls aren't usually looking, or we wouldn't necessarily assume that they're looking to an internal envelope. But the FM, we can have it go the other way, right? The inverse, instead of giving us that jump up in pitch and back down, takes the pitch down and back up. We don't hear it going down, and we just hear it coming back up. But that going down is it is inherent to this process. It has to jump instantaneously to that lower pitch and then back up. So that's in there too. We'll talk about that one in our envelope show. But this functionality is also connected to, hardwired to our timbre control. Right? If the knob is turned up and we invert this, then the envelope turns the knob up and then back down, or rather down and then back up. Okay, so we don't even need any additional modules. This is what makes this thing so valuable. Right? those attenuators come back to noon, and they do have a little of a notch there at noon, so they kind of like lock in place. You know it's at noon. You know it's in at a kind of a not adding or subtracting anything position. And now we can move along to our next tone, our next algorithm. This one is kind of a granular formant type of thing. Might have a little bit of a vocalization, synthesized vocal type of vibe. Oh yeah, we forgot the aux mode on FM. Gives us a sub oscillator. Basically another pair of oscillators, another pair of FM oscillators, it seems. But tuned an octave lower than our main output. Okay, now then, coming back to our granular. Am I getting these mixed up? I think this panel was backwards. Okay, so I just noticed. Okay, so if you compare the panel on the actual plates to this, the third and fourth insignia here are reversed. This one, the fourth one that we're on right now, looks like two little boxes and some cables connecting them. That's supposed to be the operator insignia, but it's not. The operator mode is the third one. Granular mode is the fourth one. That's what we're on now. This isn't too different than FM synthesis in the sense that we have two oscillators. One is modulating another. Totally different method of modulation, though. Did the chat die? I got a weird message saying unable to connect to chat. Hopefully it works for you guys. And now we see where this modulation starts to really hit. Come on, that's sick. Totally unintentional. and this is somehow filtered. The aux mode is somehow a filtered version of that. With harmonics controlling the type of filter. Okay. If I keep zoning out on these too much, we're never going to get along here. Okay, next one, Harmonic Oscillator. This is basically an additive oscillator, a bank of sine waves that are harmonically dispersed in the frequency range. And so we should be able to start with something that looks and feels an awful lot like a sine wave. There it is. The Harmonics Control gives us the amount of harmonics. So as we bring this in, it's going to feel kind of like we're opening up a low-pass filter a little bit. And as we change the timbre, this shifts the which of our bank of sine waves, which of those harmonics has the loudest prominence amongst the others. This might feel a little bit like a bandpass filter almost, or a resonant filter. And then we can use Morph to kind of disperse those harmonics. If you guys can get the chat working, say something so I know it's not all broken. Looks like it's working. At least the video does. Okay, so this one, oh, that was the aux. Whoops. Okay, so there's our nice sine wave. Increase the harmonics and we get something that doesn't look so much like a sine wave anymore. There's that bandpass tonality we were looking for. So the aux is more like an organ, Hammond organ drawbar frequency dispersal. This is just following the harmonic series, I believe. Okay. The next mode is a wavetable oscillator, and this is kind of like we could think of this as kind of a Borg cube, like three-dimensional bank, a matrix of wave shapes, right? And as we scan through the warp mode, the harmonics gives us access to 4 different banks of waveforms. Timbre dials through, like you could think of the banks are, there's like 4 layers. This dials through the up and down on one layer. This is the left and right on the other layer. Pick another layer. Okay, so actually it's 8 banks, technically, because the first 4 will not interpolate. And when we say interpolate, we mean smoothly morph from one wavetable to the next. See, here, let's actually turn off the envelope. So to the left side, we get interpolation. Smooth morphing of those waves. If we take harmonics to the right side, no morphing whatsoever. Sounds a lot more stepped, right? So harmonics picks a bank of 8x8 waveforms, 64 different waveforms, and then we use the timbre and morph knobs to scan and kind of find, like, we can think of it even as like this grid. We're kind of like, kind of dialing in which one of these things we want to pick, and then boom, that's the one we're using. One sec, I'm gonna reload my web page here to see if the chat reloads. Let's see if that works. Yeah. Wavetables. What is a wavetable? A wavetable is just a list of waves, right? It's a literal table, like an Excel spreadsheet, with a different wave in each different cell. And if we think about, okay, there we go. Now it's back on. Oh man, I missed a whole bunch of your chats. Tolenza, no set path. Thanks so much for coming in, by the way. I'll read back through those later. But the Bong cube, Borg cube. Yeah, Borg cube. That's what I was talking about. What is a Borg cube? Okay, well, we have some We have some non-Star Trek fans in the crowd, I guess. I'm not the biggest Star Trek fan, but the Borg is the one of the intergalactic threats to all life in the galaxy, the universe. The Borg shows up in a giant floating cube, and then assimilates all living things into their synthetic world. They land or come upon a planet, and then they consume everybody. I'm drifting off topic too, Wambra. Don't worry. They travel in a giant cube though, and the cube has any cube has three dimensions, right? X, Y, Z dimensions, and that's where we're getting in relation to these wavetables, where we can kind of dial in with these three knobs the coordinates within layers of wavetables, right? Just like I was saying a moment ago, if we think about an Excel spreadsheet, let's say it's an 8x8 spreadsheet, right? And in each one of those 64 cells is a different wave shape, a different waveform, a single cycle waveform, right? Yeah, don't feel bad. We have to take diversions when they come, right? So 8x8 grid of different wavetables. These are single cycle wave shapes, right? A sine wave might be one of them. A square wave might be one of them. A whole bunch of other weird stuff, right? You could think of one row might be a sine wave at the top, and then twice the sine wave in a in the same cycle length, then 3, then 4, then 5, then 6, then 7, then 8. So we get harmonic relationships with those wavetables. This is making wavetables sound way too complicated. I'm sorry. It makes it sound a little boring, right? All it is a bank of waves, right? And so we're just scanning around inside of that bank to find the different waves. And we basically now have 8 layers of those 8x8 8x8 grids. So that's why I was referring to a cube. I know this is starting to get way out. Now, let's move along to our next mode. Oh, by the way, the aux output here gives us a lo-fi version. This is a bit reduced version of the exact same wavetable. There are those 8 sine waves. Okay. Let's move along. Oh boy. And we get to chord mode. Okay, so this is giving us... Let's maybe plug our... Give us some keys here. Maybe a little bit short. That's better. Okay. So, here we have some chord tones. Morph is going to control the wave shape. We have kind of string-like waveforms on the left side. Maybe some organ-like basic wave shapes as well. Small wavetable of different wave shapes past 12 o'clock. Is that the brassy one? Probably. Okay, so we're going to use the harmonics knob to control what chord type we get. At 0, 12, or whatever the lowest setting here, 0%, we get octaves. Turn it up. octaves. Perfect fifth. Suspended fourth. Root third, fourth, and fifth. Here's a minor triad. Root, minor third, fifth, and an octave higher. And this moves the octave higher down to the minor seventh. Minor ninth. Minor 11th. This is a, what is it, a minor 6th, what do they call this? 13th. And then we get a major ninth, major 7th, and a major triad on the far right side. Let's speed this up a little bit. Okay, the Tambour Knob controls inversion and transposing of these chords. So let's go back to a major triad. There's our root position chord, root third, fifth octave. First inversion, third, fifth, octave, third. Fifth, root, third, fifth, probably. And then now we're transposed up an octave. So we have root position, first inversion, second inversion, and then we're transposed an octave higher. What's up, Sana? Okay, so we can keep on moving on up. The aux output gives us the root of the chord. So even if we invert, transpose, we still get the root supported out of that aux output. So if you like those wavetables and you don't like the chords, we can just come out of the aux output, or we can just kind of root the whole process using that aux output as an additional mixed-in output. Now, this allows us to very quickly, with maybe 2 4-step sequences, create a 4-chord progression, right? We can route, 1 4-step sequence to the volts per octave input. Let's do it. Let's take the voltage block. I'm going to route it out Now, the voltage block might not be the best tool for... No, whatever. It's going to work fine. Let's go with our main output first. Okay, and we will set this thing to be a 4-step sequence. Let's send it a clock. We might have to dial this in. So let's... dialing in this pattern. I might have to turn off. I think it's already set to like a pentatonic scale or something. Okay, that'll work. Okay, we have a 4-step sequence. Let's go back to the main output. Okay, so we have, in a sense, a 4-step sequence now. We're using the same chord the whole time. So maybe... Oh, Victor did not come over today. He might have overslept. By the way, he and I live very close together, so it's simply a walk down the block. So it's not like we're going out and about to do the shows in the next coming weeks, but at least not very far. That's for sure. I'll hassle him on behalf of you though, Ed. Okay, so we got one sequence going. Let's take one more. This one we can keep pretty simple. This one we're going to route to control the harmonic input. So we'll take another sequence. We'll make it 4 steps again. And let's see what we get. Let's actually make it do something now. Oh, I'm going to give him so much shit from you guys. Okay. And then, okay, so hopefully we get the idea here. We're using 2 4-step sequences to sequence the tuning and the chord shape, right? Okay. We did it. Let's move along to the vowel and speech synthesis side of things. We'll be able to go through that other side pretty quick, so we're not going to be here too much longer. Now, Now this one's pretty wild, okay? Cracking me up, you guys. Okay, so this one, we have a couple of different speech synthesis algorithms built into one. Harmonics crossfades between them. From formant filtering to a couple of banks of synthesized word generation. Letters, numbers, words. Okay, and then we can use Morph to scan through those. Tambour chooses kind of the tonal center of the vocals. And as we move the Morph knob, as we move it back and forth, we get forward and then reverse word manipulation. So right now we're on the alphabet, kind of. So we could have this. Curtains, thanks so much for joining us, man. Appreciate it. We are almost there, you guys, by the way. Okay. Again, just using built-in modulation now to create some motion. Okay, let's scan over. To our next set, okay? We got some granular cloud, okay? This is going to give us some, this is going to sound a lot like noise, right? This is going to have some of the qualities of noise because pitch is being randomized drastically. So this is 8 sawtooth waves. when Morph is to the right and these other two are at 0, we can hear those sawtooth waves coming through when triggered. And as we turn up the harmonics, we start to at first get a super saw. And then it starts to randomize outside of what might be useful for a super saw. So we pull that back, and then maybe play with the grain density. As we dial back the morph, we start to separate the granular qualities of each of those sawtooth waves. We increase the harmonics. We're randomizing the pitch of them even more. And looking at the oscilloscope, you can kind of see it's randomly grabbing little pieces of the randomly tuned sawtooth waves. You can kind of see sometimes it's a bunch of, really high frequency sawtooth waves. Sometimes it's just one little repetition of that wave. Try the aux output. That's going to give us sine waves doing the same thing. Reverb might be a nice thing for noise like this. Okay. Next one on. Not too different. Filtered noise. It's not too different at first. These first three are basically noisy, atmospheric. So harmonics kind of switches us between low pass, band pass, high pass modes. The cutoff is going to be controlled by the frequency knob. So the frequency knob now doing something a little bit different. And then the Tambour Knob is doing kind of the frequency of the noise. Morph gives us kind of the filter resonance control, which we can dial way up and we get a lot less noisy of a result. Aux does all the same stuff. We're on aux. That's why we're hearing two bandpass filters right now. We switch to the on. Let's turn that over here. So a white noise generator, really a clocked noise generator. It's a variable clock white noise. Should sound great through reverb. Again. Okay. Next one on down. Particle noise. And if we turn up that morph control, we end up with a resonant bandpass filter. Starts to give us much more identifiable tonal results, tonal plips and plops in there. Okay. Not going to spend too much time on the noise, though there's a world of sound in there. Okay. We're going to plug the trigger back in as we go down to our modal resonator and our inharmonic string model. This is a string model. Okay, this is using delay to create very, very fast delay to create a sense of a string tone. And now we have control over the type of string. Timbre controls brightness, really the brightness of the exciter, which is really just like a white noise burst. So if we turn that down, we just get kind of the reverberant quality of the string itself. And then Morph controls the envelope length, the decay time. So we could maybe patch the morph input. Use our other 4-step sequence to the output will just give us our exciter signal, which is that tiny little click of noise. That sent into a delay, very short delay, gives us this string-like tone. Might sound like a wooden bar or a metal bar sometimes. Okay, same controls for this altered. Our altered model. This is more like a tube or a drum membrane, drum head. We can get it in there to a mallet instrument, kind of. chimes. Okay. We got no trigger. We get kind of like a constantly excited tube. It tends to sound a little more like a maybe wind instrument or something. Okay. And now we get to our last 3 modes. Michael, what's up? Long time no see. Great to see you in here. Now we get to our drums, okay? We get kind of an analog kick drum. Maybe we'll tune it to actually sound like a kick drum. Okay. Morph is going to, again, control our envelope. Seems quiet all of a sudden. Okay, if we turn up timbre, you start to get this clickiness, this impact, right? What about harmonize, harmonics? Dial us in more of a kick-friendly envelope length. So on this side, we might need to do a little bit of we need to amplify this a little bit more. We can dial in our internal envelope via the FM input. As we dial up that harmonize mode, or harmonics, I don't know why I keep calling it harmonize, we start getting something that's a little bit closer to an aggressive kick. We could get an alternative out of the aux side, which gives us more of a frequency modulated type of kick drum. And again, we can use these built-in envelopes to do a little bit of extra manipulation for us. Okay, we're going to turn it back down a little bit, and we're going to go on to the next mode. So this is our kick drum mode. Again, with no trigger. Just generates a sine wave to a square wave in a sense, right? Let's go on down to the snare mode. Probably also makes sense to turn up. Also makes sense to send it a trigger. Sorry about that. I think I turned up the level a little too high. Morph again, controlling the envelope length. Harmonics controlling kind of a crossfade between pair of sine waves. Oops, wrong one. And the snare, snappy, noisy part of it. Okay, the aux output gives us kind of a frequency modulated sine wave, pair of sine waves, and a high pass filtered white noise. Okay. And we have a hi-hat. Oops, channel. And we can go between kind of a metallic hi-hat and more of a noise hi-hat. We have a high-pass filter on the Tambour Knob. Decay time on the Morph Knob. Maybe a little snappier on the non-aux output. Output uses a dirtier, looser VCA. Aux output, snappier, tighter VCA. Modulate your morph time to get open and close hi-hats. Yeah. Okay. Well, that was 2 hours of plaits. Holy shit. dogs are killing me now. Was it bit crushing? You mean the snare mode? I don't think it does bit crushing per se. I think it's simply kind of morphing between noise and sine wave sources. But yeah. Well, damn. I'm gonna have to go eat some lunch now. But that was really fun. I hope you guys got some use out of that. Just a reminder, if you don't have a modular synth, you can still play with this stuff. Go to vcvrack.com, install Vcv Rack, click on the Manage Plugins menu. Hey, maybe I'll show you how to do that right now. Hold up. Before we end this, let's wrap it up in a way that gives you something that you can actually do. Okay. So where am I going? I'm going down here. Let's bring up the Vcv Rack website. I'm going to open Vcv Rack. This might be unwise of me to do this, but I'm going to do it anyway. Let's see what happens. Okay. So, desktop. Okay, this is Vcv Rack. Now, once you have it installed, you're going to open it up. It's going to look something like this, though this thing won't be here. This is one of the ones you're going to download. So we'll get something that looks kind of like this. If you go up to Library and you go to Manage Plugins, it's going to take you to the Plugins page on the Vcv Rack website. Coffee's coming up here. Okay, rerouting to the library. Oh, look, they changed it up a little bit. Sick. Okay, we're going to go to, oh, wow, there's a lot of these now. Look at this. 1,800, almost 1,900 modules that you can get to add and supplement to the Vcv Rack collection that comes built in. And if you notice, there are free options. If I click free, maybe it'll show us how many. Oh, yeah. 1,600 of those 1,900 modules are free for you to download and use. Okay. Let's go to the open source ones. These are free, and you could take them apart and build new stuff on your own if you like. What we can do is select brand, and we're going to come down to Audible Instruments. And there they are. Okay, and I think all you have to do is subscribe. Is that what you have to do, I guess? Let's see. We hit subscribe to Audible Instruments. I think, you'll have to log in. I'm not going to log in now because I already have them installed. And then you come back over to the library, and you can see there's updates. Just hit update all and restart Vcv Rack. And then when you right click, or just double click, right click. Then over here in this menu, under brands, you're going to see Audible Instruments. And if you click Macro Oscillator 2, there it is. There's PLAITS, right? So we could route that to the output. I'm not going to do it now, but you can do it. I'll let you play with this. You could just slap it into this preset voice and replace the VCO with the macro oscillator. So, the idea here is that you can do all of this stuff yourself. You don't have to have a modular synth. You don't have to have some cockamamie complicated setup. You can do it all at home and get all of these sounds and have fun with it and not have to spend all the money. But know that these things connect to real devices, that you could actually get that device that you're playing with inside of the synth. It's not like Serum where you're never going to see a hardware Serum, most likely. So, all right, my friends, I think we're going to wrap it up there. I can't sit down because the cat's in the seat. But, yeah, that's all for today. Maybe I'll just kneel down. Make more sense. There we go. All right. Well, Wambra, Grant, Ed, oh yeah, remind me of your show ideas. I'll write them down right now. Grant wanted to do envelopes, right? Envelopes. We'll do a show on envelopes. And then, Wambra, you had a show idea. Hit me with that show idea. Somebody. Anyone else have any show ideas? Anything you'd like to see us discuss in the coming days and weeks? We're doing this every day at noon. Hopefully not for 2 hours every day. Aiming for 1 hour, but you see how deep plates goes. We could do one on VCV Rack. I have to tell you, if you like VCV Rack, if you like plates, go check out Omri Cohen's YouTube channel. He does quite a bit with VCV Rack and combining VCV Rack with real Euro Rack and hardware synthesizers. FM AM. Talked about that earlier. That'd be a good one. And Wambra, I think I missed your show idea. It might have been up there, but I think I missed it. Oh, I'm not going to scan through it now, but okay. Well, just a reminder, we'll be back here tomorrow at noon doing this all again. And we'll probably maybe do, maybe we'll talk about Mutable Cloud's alternate modes. Yeah, okay. The most popular third-party one, which would be Parasites. There's also the Camroll beat repeat mode. I actually have videos on those. So if you go check out the if you go check out some of my older videos, there's one on the beat repeat mode. There's one on the Clouds Parasites, I think. And we actually just did a Clouds show a few weeks ago. So you could probably go check that out too. But we could always do another Clouds. Let's see. Do American modules. Suggest some. I'm happy to do some. I have some make noise modules. I have a lot of other modules. I think what we'll do tomorrow, though, is we'll talk about the Maleko Manther, and maybe we'll talk about block diagrams and how we can demystify what's happening inside of our synthesizers. That might give us a little bit of a language to use to take apart and understand the internal functionality of a synthesizer, regardless of what its confusing panel might look like. So maybe we'll do that tomorrow. And I think we have a whole bunch of great ideas you guys have recommended here. And yeah. Not Parasites. Well, I'm not going to make any judgments on who likes what per se. You can, I'm sure, find her opinions on the alternative use of these modules. I don't think she necessarily doesn't like the Parasites so much as the fact that it's cramming a lot in and it starts to get confusing. That's one thing. I can't speak for her. I don't know what she likes and doesn't like. So I can only say though that, one thing that she is really good at is coming up with interfaces that, are approachable. Emily is the creator of Mutable Instruments. She is the singular mind behind the Mutable Instruments modules and lineup. And I think we can all agree she is an absolute genius and really incredible mind. And this lineup of modules are something that have kind of changed modular synthesis to a degree. Modular synthesis, I would say, was largely an analog-focused pursuit. Not completely, but she kind of made digital cool again and unique and interesting. So, and open source, we have to say. That was kind of one of her main intentions, it seems, behind the design of these modules was to make them open source, buildable, approachable, remakeable. She does not like clones, and I do have understandably, I do have an an interest in buying the pretty much the whole line of Mutable Instruments modules, but um, you know, we have limitations that we deal with sometimes, including size um, and things of this nature. So, um, that said, please support Mutable Instruments. They're an incredible lineup of instruments, and Emily has been doing great work. She just released an alternative firmware of her own, or a new firmware, I guess, for Marbles, the random source generator, amongst many other things that I think is one of the most recent modules they released. So, anyway, I'm going to shut up now because I've talked for way too long. But thank you guys again so much for coming and joining us. Please help get the word out about tomorrow's show. I'll be putting the link up relatively soon. And yeah, can't wait to see you guys again tomorrow. Thanks again for dropping through, and we'll see you on the flip side.